April 20th, 1999, 11:30 a.m. Interviewing Shirley Foster, Utah Reuter interviewing, and Susan Acuna on the camera. Ms. Foster, when and where were you born? And tell me a little bit about your childhood.
I was born at Star, Texas. That's in Mills County. And I was the sixth child. I was from a big family. We lived in the country on a farm. And
Did you go to school out there too?
yes, went to Star School and graduated from high school there.
And did you go to college?
Well, I came to Drones Business College as soon as I graduated, or shortly thereafter, and then I went back to school in about 80 and got my associate degree in human services at Cisco Junior College.
Back to your childhood, can you tell me a little bit about what life was like on your farm?
Well, we didn't have a whole lot, but we were, and we worked. Of course, I don't think we worked like I hear some people talking about nowadays, that oh, they just act like that's all that they did was work. But anyhow, my parents didn't have much, but we did have plenty to eat, and they clothed us well. And we had some toys and things like that.
And your parents' names?
Bill and Maggie Lucas.
And they lived there for a long time?
My daddy lived in that county all of his life. My mother originally was born in Arkansas, but she came to Texas in a covered wagon when she was a baby.
What are some of your first memories as a child?
I really don't know.
Holidays? Did you have special holiday traditions that you...
Mainly Christmas, and we didn't get big things, but considering their means, they did well by us. We had dolls, and the girls got dolls usually, and we hang up our stocking at the foot of the bed, and they filled them with apples, or Santa Claus did, apples and oranges and bananas and peppermint sticks and different kinds of candies. And I remember one Christmas, I don't know how my mother did it with all of us kids. She made a little table and a little bed for our dolls. And she made them out of orange crates and had painted them. I don't know how she ever had that time to herself to get that done. I think that was one of the Christmases I was the most surprised, and we got the little tea sets and we all got new dolls. But there was 3 of us girls fairly close together. And one of my sisters, they used to think that Mother dressed us alike, and people used to think that we were twins.
You were close in age?
Yes, 2 years apart.
What about the life on the farm? The weather probably affected your life quite a bit back then, or did it? In what ways did it? I know a lot of times when you have drought and stuff, did it make it difficult for you?
Well, as I said, we didn't have a whole lot, but I don't remember that my husband, he was reared in a small town, and I think he had it a lot harder than we did, because we had a garden, and we had pigs, and we had cows, and of course we had horses. We rode them and used them, for saying about things in the place. But Dad always had a nice riding horse, and which in later years the grandkids all like to go to Granddaddy's because he always had a horse that they could ride, a gentleman.
That's good. You were born in 24?
That's right.
1924, and so what are your memories of the Depression period, or did that affect y'all very much?
I don't remember it affecting me so much, but I do remember my oldest sister and her best friend was from a small family, and they were better off than we were, but I know she was always wanting clothes, and I know that my mother tried to talk to her about that, but she just couldn't keep up with that family, we were from a big family and everything. But I really don't remember too much else. As I said, we had plenty to eat, and we were dressed very well, and we raised a lot of what we eat, of course. And we even had a corn sheller, and we shucked that corn and had a thing that we turned and shelled the corn, and we took that corn to a mill, and then they made it into cornmeal, and then we sold, at times we sold cream, and we sold eggs from the farm for the staples and groceries that we had to have. And as for social life at that time, it was just the school events, and then on Saturday afternoons, I think it's when I was about 12 or 13 years old, we used to go to Goldthwaite. Of course, that was a big deal. And Mother'd give us a quarter, and the movie cost $0.10, and we had that whole quarter to spend.
What were some of the other things you did for recreation as a kid?
That was just about school and church, and going to Goldthwaite on Saturday afternoon.
That's the big one, huh?
Mm-hmm.
What was the biggest technological thing that you can remember as a child, or what was the big thing that happened? Did you get a TV or radio? Was radio a big part of your life?
We had a radio, but my daddy kind of controlled it. No, we didn't have TV.
I guess that would have been later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about your car? Did y'all have a big car?
We had a car ever since I could remember. The older siblings drove it to school for the family.
Did your father do all the work on the farm himself?
Oh no. There was 3 boys, and they helped with taking care of the stock and milking the cows and things. But the girls more or less worked in the house. I do remember a few years going to the fields and chopping corn and picking cotton, but I don't know, it seemed like whenever I got about 13 or 14, we quit raising cotton there, so I didn't really do outside work like a lot of girls in families did. I guess we had the boys for one reason, and I never did learn to milk a cow. I tried to, but I really tried. I wasn't faking. I couldn't.
Couldn't quite get the hang of it.
No.
Okay. What about, let's see, how old were you when the war started?
Let's see. Graduated in 41. I think it started, I was about 16, I guess.
Do you remember how you felt, say, when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
I just remember being kind of excited, or people talking about it. It's about all I remember.
You don't really remember?
We didn't take a daily paper or anything like that. And of course, the radio was about all we had.
What about politics? Were y'all a political family back then?
Not especially. My daddy used to vote a Democrat ticket, but then in later years he he, he was just straight Democrat, and then later he shifted and would vote for the person or something. And of course, Mama kind of followed along with whoever he voted for.
How did you come to Abilene?
Well, I wanted to be a nurse, but my daddy didn't want me to be a nurse. I don't know why. And so I just decided, I didn't think I wanted to go to college 4 years, and then the family didn't have much. So I thought, well, I'll just come to Ron's Business College. And so I came up here, and they dumped me, and and I worked in a boarding house, Miss Nunley's boarding house there, and went to school for a while, and then I quit doing that. And I just roomed with different girls. Some would come and some would go, and until finally I took a civil service. I studied bookkeeping most of the time, but I took a civil service test, and then I was called to report to, got notification to report to Count Barkley at the station hospital. So I started working out there and worked until it closed.
You remember when you went out there?
42, I believe.
And you did what?
I was a medical secretary. Whenever I was appointed to this job, well, I was secretary of the Limited Service and CDD board. And what it was a board of directors from the hospital that sit on the board, and some of the clients were patients in the hospital, and they would bring them before the board, and they would determine where they thought that they were physically able to go back to full duty, or if they should be given limited service, or if they should be discharged from the service. But our biggest and our busiest time was when the field officers were fixing to pull out or something, and they had troops that just couldn't make those hikes and things. And we had what was a ward, and the hospital's where this board room was. It was a big room there where they brought those different men in before the board and talked to them, interviewed them, and then the doctors discussed, what they thought about them and everything. But I met, whenever those field officers would bring them in, there would just be strings of men all the way down the hallway and then out the door and on down. And of course, whenever I first started, I had never heard of being a country girl. I didn't know what psychoneurosis was or pest planus and all of those things. And that was some of the most popular diagnoses at that time. Yes. And hypertension, that was one of the, and I worked on that board until they discontinued that. And then they sent me to personnel, for civilian personnel. Mary Whitfield was over civilian personnel then. And I worked there for a while. Then they were needing a ward secretary. So they sent me to a ward, and it was the cardiovascular renal section. And Captain Bass, John B. Bass, was my boss there when I first started working. Later he made major. And he was really hyper. The doctors had coffee every morning, and most of the time they'd go unless they were too involved with the patient. But of course they could be contacted at any time. And boy, they'd tell him, the nurse notified him that something was wrong with one of those patients, and he would run down those halls. You don't see doctors doing that nowadays. And the doctors were really dedicated in those days. And then later, he left. And Major Sachs was my boss. Well, he was entirely different. He was really dedicated, but he was just calm and collected. Whereas whenever Major Bass was dictating me, he would just walk back and forth from my desk as he talked and everything. But Major Sachs was so calm and everything. And then later he left, and then I worked for Captain Steinberg till Camp Marta closed. When Camp Marta closed, they give us a whole list. Us people at the hospital, we had a list of places that we could transfer. And I don't know why. She really wasn't my best friend or anything, but a girl that was older, Lois Kennedy, she started talking to me to let's go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and two of her friends was going. But she said that she couldn't room with them, and she wanted me to go and be her roommate in Santa Fe. So that's what I don't know if you want to know any more about that, any more about my career now, but
Sure.
That's when I left Camp Marta anyhow.
What kind of things did y'all do for recreation?
Well, we did a lot of business. We went to movies, and now some of the girls went to dances, and I went a few times, but I was brought up in a Baptist home, and we were not permitted, well, the girls weren't anyhow, but I think the boys did well, but we weren't permitted to go, and I obeyed them fairly well. But anyhow, we weren't permitted to dance, and I didn't want to go. But some of those girls got me a date, and they took me out a few times to places. And I'd just sit there and I'd say I couldn't dance. And this Maxie, I don't know what her name was, she got on to me one time. She said, "Get out there." Said, "If they step on their feet, so just kick them on the shin and tell them it's their fault." But I never did dance very much. And then we went bowling some, too. They got me a date with a bowling instructor out there. Well, I never learned that very well either. And that's about all that I remember doing. And then the girls spent a lot of time together. And we in this barrack, in this dormitory that we lived in, we saved our pennies up. And then one night they'd say, "This will be our night to be together." And we would play penny ante poker. And we'd get real loud and everything, and these two old ladies, they'd start coming after us, and we'd run and hide, and do, just like a bunch of kids.
You lived in the dorm?
Yes.
Civilian dorm?
They had a civilian dorm. When I first started working at Camp Marta, I commuted. I walked from where I lived to the bus station, and then rode a bus out there. Then after I was at Camp Marta for a while, well, through civilian personnel, I heard of this carpool, and the people that were driving could get extra gas if they had passengers. Gas was rationed, didn't it? So I got in with this carpool, and this lady, Ruth Lattice, that was driving, she was a ward secretary too. Well, she picked us up, and then there was another ward secretary, Beulah. Can't think of her last name, but not too many years ago I saw that her name was still in the telephone directory. She lives on Vine Street. Can't think of her last name now. And then there was another girl, I believe, that worked in the dental lab, the sure was that were in that carpool. And then later they announced that they had barracks that they were going to let the civilian employees that wanted to move on the base, well, we used to call it camp then, but they call it base out here, Air Force now. So we got our little dressers and kind of decorated up those little rooms and had nice quarters there. And we had a lot of fun there. Of course, I think we acted up more when we got over, when later they moved us over in the nurses' quarters. But I remember one time, of course, the dates were not supposed to come past the receiving line. But anyhow, while I was living out there one time, well, some of them complained that they thought they heard a man in a room upstairs. Well, I lived upstairs. But anyhow, now this time I had come to town to spend the night with my sister. And people had got to talking about what they'd do if they found anyone. So whenever I came to work the next day, the girls was telling me all about it. They said that somebody screamed, and even these old ladies, they come with their their brooms and their mops and different hammers and different things, you know, getting ready for him, and said this man just walked right down the hall, walked right past him. Not a one of them done. So, and as the rumors went around, somebody said that they, now I don't know whether it's true or not, but they thought this girl had screamed. She invited the man up there, and then she got scared and did the screaming. But they said they thought at first it was me screaming because I was a baby, you know. But they were real good to me. I was considered the baby out there.
And you were how old?
19 or 20, I guess. 19, I guess. Like 19 or 20. And then later, just I don't know how long it was before Camp Bartley closed, there was a shortage of nurses, and they decided to move us in one of the nurses' quarters. And that was right connected to the hospital, so we lived there for a while. I can't remember how long now. But that was after the personnel had started leaving, and we didn't have as many people there.
You dated quite a few of the soldiers, or not?
Oh, well, you could always have a date if you wanted it then.
There was plenty of young men to go around.
Yeah, I'd date one, and then he'd get shipped out, and then another organization come in. But it was real funny when I was going to school and everything, of course, being a country girl, not being around soldiers, not knowing anything about it, I was scared of them. Now, I know I used to, whenever I would be walking from where I was living when I first came here to school, if one of them whistled me, it just scared me to death. I'd start walking faster. I'd heard that they were such rough people. But that changed as time went on. But then the 45th was here, and then the 90th, and then I remember the 7th Cavalry, I think it's the 7th Cavalry Division. That's the ones that I remember dating and running around with quite a bit.
What made them?
But every time a new group would be coming in, you'd hear the civilians in town talking about, oh, that's a rough bunch, that's a tough bunch, when they hit this town. Of course, Abilene was small then.
What kind of things did you see going on in Abilene at that time? How did the town react? And
well, people started opening up their homes and renting out rooms. I did this a lot before I moved, or did this some before I moved to the base. I moved around quite a bit. There'd be a girl in school and she'd go back home or something or another, but the people opened up their homes and they would make rooms, you know, into bedrooms, or some of them fixed them up with little hot plates, and we could cook in that. We always shared the bath, and we were supposed to always leave the bath clean. There would be several people sharing the same bathroom sometime. Maybe the family would have a big house and they'd rent out several rooms, you know. And it seems like we did very well. I don't know how, but now everybody wants a private bath, but we did okay. And that's about all that I remember. I mean, of course, I wasn't with the adults much at that time. I was with the younger people.
Did you make any good friends during that time? Who were they?
Well, whenever I lived in town, my roommates were usually, I always considered them pretty good friends. One girl, the girl that I roomed with when I first went to Camp Bartley, is Edith Wood, and she went to work for Thai Air Force Base, so, and I was working at Camp Martin. And we were pretty good friends for a long time. She still lives here and lives at View, Texas, and she worked at DICE and retired just a few years ago. And then whenever we were in those dorms, there were several of the girls that were real good friends, and we corresponded. It was really sad whenever we had to close up and leave. We had had such a good time together and everything. And, we corresponded for a while and kept up. Of course, later I married a military man, and we had different friends over us. So finally we just quit communicating.
Do you remember how much money you made?
When I started out, I made $12.60 annually.
$1,260
annually. But that was quite a bit of money then.
What kind of things did your wages go toward?
Well, I remember one of the first things I bought was a watch that I was needing a watch. And, of course, for room and food when I lived in town. Now then, we were more fortunate than we that worked in the hospital. We got a balanced meal for 28 cents. And I don't know just really what I spent for clothes and just foolishness, I guess. Oh, I bought usually took a portion of a war bond or something out for war bonds all the time out of my paycheck.
What stands out in your time, in your mind during that time? A special event or person or?
Well, I really don't know. There were several people that I thought were really dedicated to their job. But I do remember when I first started working, they put me in an office, being the country girl that I was, and being scared and always obeying my parents and everything. Had put me in an office, and right at the back of me was Captain Swanner. He was the adjutant of the hospital. And I would hear him. Those people would come in there and he would curse them out. And it just really sounded bad to me. And he would come down that hall and he would just kind of look up there and glare at me all the time. I was scared of him. But now, later, Mary Whitfield said that he knew that he was scared. He said, just don't pay, that's the lady that was over civilian personnel, said, don't pay any attention to him. But anyhow, I know I was really scared when I first started working. And then, they used a lot of profanity back in those days. Now, later, whenever I met my husband, and when we were associated with the military, I never heard any. But I know when I was sitting on that board, those doctors would get to discussing things, and they'd get uptight, and they'd start, and they'd say, excuse me, Miss Lucas, and it wouldn't be long till they'd say, excuse me, Miss Lucas, again. It was just going on and on all the time.
That was your maiden name?
Mm-hmm.
Did everybody smoke back then?
Yeah, including me, but I didn't smoke there. Oh, yes. I was wondering if I may have cancer yet. I meant that room would just be full of smoke. The doctors all smoked, and I'd get up and empty the ashtray sometime in between. But anyhow, and then those field officers that come in, by the time they got in there, they were wanting to get rid of some of those guys. They didn't want to take them overseas with them, or they would get in a hot argument, and they'd be lighting up those cigarettes one right after another.
That's one of the big changes since back then, isn't it?
Sure is.
Do you remember the POWs any, or?
I just remember passing by, and we knew they were there.
What did you feel about that? And was there any sentiment at all in town or at the
seemed like I
camp?
kind of felt sorry for them myself, but I don't know what the sentiment was in town. I didn't read the paper back then.
Did anybody that you had gotten close to, any of the soldiers, get shipped off to Europe, or
Oh,
Anybody?
yeah. Oh, I got some, from one guy, I got, male coming back missing in action. He was in the 90s division.
Yes. And where did he go?
He was killed.
And he went to Europe.
I think that's where it was, yeah. I can't remember now.
That's fine.
But we didn't know at the time what happened, but then somebody got a letter later and said that, but I can't remember now just what the story was on, but somebody told me about it later. Somebody that I had double dated with us or something, somebody that knew him, got a letter, and now I can't remember just what it was. They said it happened, but he was killed. And that's the only one that I ever got a missing in action letter from.
Did you meet your husband there?
No, I had this little stint in Santa Fe, New Mexico at Brown General Hospital that I told you about, that Lois talked me into going out there and being a roommate. Well, after I was there about 6 months, well, I guess I was kind of homesick, and it wasn't as exciting life as it was back there in Camp Barkley. So I thought, well, I'd been working in civil service for a good while, and I was disgustingly healthy during those days, never missed any for sick leave, and I'd accrued annual leave, so I thought, well, I'm going to go back and spend some time with my parents. So I resigned, and I went back to my parents' home, and I stayed there, I don't know, a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then I was ready to go back to work. I thought, so I didn't know how I stood on the civil service roster or anything, but I wrote, sent in my resume to the McCloskey General Hospital at Temple, Texas. That was an amputee center then. And I got a reply right away wanting me to report for duty. And I went there and I worked there, and that work was different. And at first it was, it really, I don't know, I was really kind of saddened at all the amputees, you know. Some of them had lost their limbs and everything, but then they were really rehabilitated well because they danced and they did all kind of things. And I stayed there till it closed, and then I transferred to the Veterans Administration at Waco. And I worked there for a while, and the Veterans Administration was needing, they had a contract for 50 beds at Fort Hood, Texas, and they needed someone to go there and stay. So a girl that went out there, and she kind of trained me on the job for, I don't know how long, but for a few weeks. And then she went back to Waco. And then later I heard that they had quarters at, well, it was called, what was it called then? Campbell or Fort Hood. I don't think it's called a Fort Field. But anyhow, I went there, and I wasn't there very long, and a lady that I knew and lived in the dormitory at Camp Barkley was there. And so she and I had visited some there, and one night I was in the bathroom. I don't know, while I was washing out maybe undies or something. We used to wash our undies out there and everything. And so here she come in and she said, "I've got a nice guy that out in the car, and he needs a date. Said, would you go with him?" So I was kind of new there, so I went. And so then after that, well, we didn't date too long till he proposed.
What year was that?
let's see, 46.
So the war was already over.
Mhm. He had come back. He was in World War II, and he had come back. And we got married, and he had been over during World War II. He thought he was just sitting, we were just going to be stationed there for some time. And I got pregnant pretty soon after I got married, and he got orders for Japan. Oh boy, that just broke my heart. But fortunately, because of his World War II time, and they did have quarters, he was a first sergeant then, in our area, he got quarters, and he got me over there. And whenever I left on that train from Goldthwaite, there was women with children that had been separated from their husbands for a year and 2 years, and were they jealous of me, because here my husband hadn't been over there any time, and I was getting to go. I did not know why I was getting to go, ahead of them, and know that there was people that was waiting to go, but it was because of his World War II time that he got me over there. And that child was born in Tokyo. We came back to the States, and we moved. We weren't like the Air Force. The longest we ever stayed at one station in the United States was 10 months. And he would always get in a unit that was on the move. And of course, he was in the Army, and they always moved. He did go back, and he took a test, and he made warrant officer, and he was CW03 whenever he decided to retire. But anyhow, we were back in the States, and we were stationed in California and different places, El Paso and different places around. And then he got orders for Germany. I was pregnant again. So he was going to leave me home. It was during the Berlin build-up. And, well, to begin with originally, we had our household goods shipped, and I was planning to go with him. And I took that, he left, and left me with my folks. And during that time, they were getting all the news about all these people coming back, lieutenants coming back, because they were scared and everything. And they didn't want me to go. But he had carried papers to get me over there, because they didn't want you to go on a ship. See, by the way, I went on a ship to Japan the first time, and it took 16 days to get over there. And we were in storms and everything, and it was just women and children. And then the second, and when I went to Germany then, well, he hand-carried papers. Well, whenever he went over there, he was going to stay. But every time we got separated, he got to want me to come. He always wanted me with him. He'd act real brave, and he was going to, go stick it out by himself. But anyhow, then whenever he got over there, then hand-carried those papers, and because they didn't want you to travel on a ship after you were 7 months pregnant. And so I got in a whiz down there. Well, during that time, I decided not to go, and then he decided he wanted me on over there. So I went on over there, and he hand-carried those papers, and had practically a new car, practically giveaway. Our household goods had never got back there, and my family rushed around, kind of got me ready to go, and I took a plane to New York. And I got up there, and I had to have a physical, and all my legs were swelled up and everything, and they said I couldn't go. Oh, I was just sick. After being away from home all that time and everything, I did not want to go back there. And of course, I had one child. But finally then they said, well, that maybe they could get me on a plane, space available. See, they weren't flying dependents over there at that time. And so they put me in an officer's quarters, and I had this kid And I was in New York, and I didn't have boots or galoshes for that time of the year. But they told me to watch that schedule. Well, I'd have to walk over to this place where they posted that when the planes was going to depart and everything. I'd wag that kid over there, wag that kid over there, and we'd look. And so, but finally it came up, and I got to go to Germany, fly to Germany.
What a mess.
And then I went to Japan again.
Where else have you been? Is that just the only 2 places you've been?
Overseas, yes, and all over the United States. As I said, we moved and we retired. We put in for retirement in Japan last time because when he got in his 20 years, every time anything went wrong, they could retire 20 years then. When anything went wrong, he wanted to retire. And he put it in that he'd get to headquarters and they'd call him in and they'd talk to him. They said, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you get out of here? And he didn't know. So, and then he'd withdraw. But the 4th time he put it in, it went through and we got out.
And what brought you back to Abilene?
Well, we didn't really have any place to go. His parents were dead. He had a sister that had 2 sisters that lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And one worked for the American Airlines. And she didn't know it. She said she felt like he could get on, but she said, just send your resume. And he never did. But then my parents were still living, and they were in the country of Abilene. I had 2 sisters living here. And they said they thought that he could get work. Of course, he had a family. He needed to work besides being retired from the service. They said they felt like that he could get work here. And so we give this as our home address, and he came, and he, I suppose he looked for a month or so. He was getting kind of depressed. Then he finally, it looked like he was going to get a job at state school as a supply officer, and then Nice Federal Credit Union was fixing to close. It was in bad shape, and he had been he had been out there, and so they hired him. And he worked out there until he was a workaholic. And he was manager of Dice Credit. He saw it grow, and but he worked many hours. He would maybe come in at 12 o'clock, and he'd set that alarm and be back out there about 5 or 6 in the morning. But anyhow, eventually, after about, I think he worked there about 13 years, he had his 2nd stroke, so he had to quit. And then the doctors didn't expect him to live very long, but he lived until 91. He lived several years. In fact, they told him to get things in order, and he went out, and I didn't much want to do it, but he went out and bought our lots, and we were all set.
So your time at Camp Barkley really didn't sway your decision to come back to Abilene, or did it in some way?
I guess because the 2 sisters was here.
Main reason. Well, I appreciate you talking with me.
I don't feel like I helped you much on Camp Barkley. You're gonna have to find you someone else.
You did fine. Thank you.